Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, Module Leader for Tech 3022, Social Media Practice, and this is the eighth video introduction to Lecture 8. No, it's the video introduction to Lecture 8, not the eighth video introduction to the eighth lecture. I haven't done 7 more of these things for this one, although we could do if you want me to. This week we're going to talk about kind of think it's worth, as we've talked a lot over the last few weeks about the principles of investigation, so the kind of methodological approach to gathering data and engaging with people to find out how and what they think about sugar and carbohydrates as a topic. And I thought it'd be useful for us to kind of go back to some of the kind of ideas and issues that are relevant to this framework of media discussion. So I thought we'd kind of look back at some of the basic principles just to remind ourselves what the model is that we're working to, and if you like, what your client requirements might be for the subsequent project after Christmas where you make a campaign. So we're talking about the idea of kind of the main focus is on what's called metabolic syndrome. So that's the confluence of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, those kind of ailments, which are an outcome of a poor diet, a diet which is based on, ironically, malnutrition founded on excess. So excessive carbohydrate impact, excessive insulin production, and a decline in activity and physical engagement with the social environment, the world, the environment. So let's put this in the context of the impact that it's having on our health services and what it means for things like the sustainability of the NHS, and how are we going to pay for all of these things. So I'll use lots of examples again. I've done this in the past. I've collated plenty of news articles which you can use to illustrate this. And what I thought I'd do this time is to extend this discussion by dropping in some ideas about that we accumulated last year, that we looked at last year, about the energy drinks culture associated with electronic gaming. So it gives us a kind of specific example, specific area, field to look at, which we might take on. You can choose which area you're going to work on with your project, your campaign later. And so there's things like the kind of the idea that the drinks manufacturers are selling gaming fuel to young impressionable people, and that these products are actually doing them harm. You wouldn't sell them alcohol because that's restricted, and yet we can sell them these caffeine laced and sugar-laced products, which do them as much harm, but it's regarded as being safe because it's non-alcoholic. So what we've got to question and what we're trying to investigate, and this is what you're doing for coursework B, is kind of how do people react and respond and talk about and discuss these issues. So what are people's general reaction to is metabolic syndrome, processed food disease is what Robert Lustig calls this. Is that self-inflicted? Is that down to people's personal values? They just make bad choices, or is it a context? Is it as Professor Richard Marmot talks about? It's the idea that actually you've got to take into account people's circumstances. And if all you can buy is rubbish in the shops, then it's no wonder, and all you can afford is the low price, long life, high carbohydrate, poor nutritional, food with no nutritional value. If that's all you can afford, then obviously that's what you access, and that in itself is a problem. So as a social solution to this, our ideas have to come by letting go of some of our prejudices about what got us into this mess in the first place. And I do find the kind of against the sugar tax argument very spurious, because it kind of, it's like kind of denial from my perspective. It kind of seems to say that this is all down to individuals making bad choices, and if they only were healthy, well-controlled, self-adjusted people, then they would be fine. And that's very difficult to do when you're bombarded by media messages telling you that all of these products that are effectively junk are good for you, and in fact they're not. So we'll look at things like the kind of rise of food banks, the kind of the fat shaming kind of idea, the kind of what comes through in some of the discussions and the arguments that people have online. And then we'll kind of reiterate how we will use netnography to collect this information and use this information, because we're interested in people's social practices and how people make sense of their social experience. How do people bring all of these elements together? It's the background noise that's out there, kind of consume these kind of products in these kind of ways. But then when you come to make do you make a conscious choice for what you use? Do you stop being attendant to the products that you buy? Are you just ill-informed? Are you overwhelmed? Are you in a position where you can't argue against it? There's no choice. There's a whole load of social practices that we want to sort of understand how and in what way people express those practices and think about and understand those practices. So this is why the kind of sociological techniques are very important for us, because they tell us a different kind of story. They tell us a kind of a narrative story, an indication of what it is that people are trying to deal with, and trying to a sense of belonging, a sense of engagement, a sense of participation that drives a lot of people's use of these food types and products. And we all do it. We all are subject to these pressures, and it's very difficult to stand outside of it and fight against it. So it's kind of, what would be our approach, if you like, to our sense of negotiation with these things. And what we're going to try and do after Christmas is to offer an alternative view about putting forward a different set of values, a different approach to thinking about food, which pushes back against some of these mainstream practices which are turning out to be so damaging to people. So some videos to watch as well with this. And the notes are up on the wiki, so if you go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk, if you've got any comments or ideas that we can discuss in the workshops, you can add them to the DMU Talk portal, which is talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. You can download that. You can either access that via a website, via a web browser, or you can access it via an app which you can download from the Apple Store or the Android Store, so you can load it as an app on your phone if you want to as well. But I'll see you at the lecture on Monday.